My paper was an ideological criticism of George W. Bush and the immediate events after 9/11, and an analysis of several different speeches and moments that ultimately defined his presidency. And I used, like I said, the ideological criticism method. My summary and background information was it was thorough, and I gave the complete. I thought it was necessary to describe all events prior that related to 9/11, and including intelligence briefings, what he was doing before. So I mean I have 4, 5, 6 pages just dedicated to the summary of the events that actually occurred on 9/11, and I compare it to, it said to make compare it to two methods that are similar to artifacts. So I used a examination of Ronald Reagan's "Tear Down This Wall" speech by some chick from Elizabethtown College, who used a Burkean analysis, and then I also used a ideological criticism of the Gettysburg Address. I spend time, describing the widespread idea and general consensus of each action that Bush took during 9/11, and then I spend, another towards the end disproving it with regards to closer examination that gives a better understanding of the actual events, and then I disprove it and give my opinion, which obviously you take that with a grain of salt. It is my opinion, but it'd be hard for me without bias to be reading my paper and maintain the common perception of George W. Bush, which is largely negative. I wanted the main point of my paper. I hope I get away with using technically several different artifacts. My idea is to use the whole day of 9/11 as my artifact, but if I had to narrow it down to one, which I believe in my paper I put the most emphasis on because it's the most important, was his bullhorn speech on Ground Zero 3 days after 9/11. I think that it just so impressive, and just that it was unscripted and on a whim. I think it's hard to not like the guy, and whether or not you agree with him, you're behind him. If you do, you got sympathy and understanding. If you don't, I'll go ahead and read it. When George W. Bush arrived on Ground Zero 3 days after September 11th, he shook every hand there, establishing a connection to his audience and a sense of togetherness amongst the barrage of yells for blood and revenge. He informed Andy Carr that he'd like to say something to the crowd. There was no stage, no microphone, and no prepared remarks. Card pointed to a mound of metal that was once a fire truck. An older firefighter named Bob Beckwith pulled W up to stand beside him. One of the members of his advance team tracked down a bullhorn for Bush to address the crowd. His first instinct was to console, as he told them that America was on bended knee in prayer for the victims, the rescuers, and the families. People shouted, "We can't hear you," which led Bush to deliver the famous goosebump-generating response. "I can hear you," he shot back to a cheer. "I can hear you, the rest of the world hears you, and the people who knocked these buildings down will hear all of us soon." The crowd exploded into a release of energy I had never felt before. Those were his words, as they struck up a chant of USA, USA, USA. Bush had been hoping to rally the workers and express the tenacity of the country, and he did so on a whim of unprepared brilliance and a heart that is often rare in politicians. Bush had given America the hope and patriotism to begin taking gradual steps toward normalcy and a sense of safety and protection. September 11th redefined sacrifice and responsibility. It also redefined Bush's presidency. The events and explanations of that week are often misconstrued and ill-informed, criticized and mocked. When presented in the light of truth, however, they are the key to understanding his presidency. These are his words. "There were so many decisions that followed, many of them controversial and complex. Yet after 9/11, I felt my responsibility was clear. For as long as I held office, I could never lose thought of what happened to America that day. I would pour my heart and soul into protecting the country, whatever it took. A lack of compassion and understanding of circumstance also plagued Bush and his legacy. The war came upon us, these are his words again, the war came upon us so unexpectedly, and at that point in time you just deal with the issues, and there's certain gravity, of course, that comes when you start making decisions that involve life. This wasn't one of those moments you can weigh the consequences and think about the policies you decide. And I made the decisions as best I could in the fog of war. Ultimately, Bush was determined to protect the country and its citizens and magnanimously fulfill the role he never wanted of being a wartime president. September 11, 2001 unveiled the character, leadership, and professionalism Bush exhibited in the War on Terror.